How do you build a product to compete in a market where your competitors are running Super Bowl ads? That's what we're going to talk about today and much more with Todd from Showit. They built an incredible product and it's 19 years old. They compete with Elementor, Squarespace, Wix. How do you evolve this company over nearly 20 years, almost killed by Adobe Flash? It's a fascinating story you're really going to enjoy today on Product Driven. To survive and thrive, you must adopt a product-driven mindset. Today we're talking to Todd Watson, who's the founder and CEO of Showit, who is creating yet another website designer. And I'm really excited to talk to the backstory of how he built this company. And there are a million website design tools out there, and some of them, as Todd would say, his competitors run Super Bowl ads. But he's built a very successful business. And what I really want to focus on today is how do you go about building a product, thinking about, what your niche is and carving out your niche in the industry. And then he's got a product that's almost 20 years old. And how does that product evolve over 20 years? So Todd, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Matt, it's great to be with you. I love your last name. I don't know that we're actually related, but it's
Watsons
great.
Are here today. I like it.
Yeah.
Well, so your company, Showit, which is showit.com, has a very cool, website builder design tool for people like me who, of course, don't want to do HTML. We don't want to do CSS. We want a simple point and click sort of interface. And the productdriven.com website, by the way, might be hosted on Showit very soon. The next time somebody goes, check it out, because I need to build productdriven.com. But tell me, how did you get started with this? You were almost 20 years into this, overnight success.
Yeah.
Tell us, how did you get started of I want to build a website design tool?
Yeah. Well, I actually probably went kicking and screaming a little bit. I had a business partner early on when we started, and we had started with a slideshow builder, and that slideshow builder was for photographers, event photographers, wedding photographers. A lot of times would use these slideshows, and that started to take off. And what we realized is they were building these slideshows online, but they would put them on a website that was not great. It was a template that was just not so. Not unique. And so we
They
realized,
don't want to do HTML, right? They just want to upload their cool photos.
Yeah. And so what we realized is that, especially in the photography world, they wanted their unique look and their brand. And so my business partner at that time was like, let's build a website builder that feels more like Photoshop, more like a designer, something like that a photographer would like to use. And I was like, wow, that's a hard feat, but we went ahead and tackled and went after that. And so we built that on Flash, back in 2007, 2008. And, we built this really cool visual designer for websites. And that kept going. In 2014, that business was dying. And so I actually went to my business partner and said, hey, can I take over that business? Because he didn't want to rebuild it. He was like, let's just let it die. And we had another product that was taken off, and I said, why don't you take that and run with it? So he did that. And so 2014, we kind of started our rebuild, and that became 2016 we launched, and that's the product that we have today.
Well, you talk about the tech stack that you create and building the software, building a web-based sort of visual editor, think about Photoshop or all these other kinds of tools, like you mentioned, is a difficult task, right? But it makes total sense to do it in Flash. But think Apple killed that, right? At some point in time. When did that happen with Apple?
Yeah, it was a slow progression. I think for us that we're building on Flash, there was always this hope that it's going to work. They're doing Adobe's doing, they're doing demos. It's going to work at some point. And really 2010, 2011 is really when Apple was like, nope, we're not going to do this. We're just literally, we're not going to build plugins. We're not going to do Flash. And so that was when we really saw the writing on the wall that oh man. And so we were doing things to work around that. We were generating mobile sites using screenshots of whatever they designed. And so, we were trying to get around as much as we could to make that work. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't a great experience for the user. And so we just felt it, people leaving, over and over as the mobile web just changed so much.
So around 2014, you're like, okay, we've got this product, we've got customers, people love it. Apple is sort of killing us here. We're gonna have to rebuild this thing. As you said, one of your business partners decided to kind of go a different direction. How long did it take you to like re-architect this product, like rebuild the whole product from the ground up?
Yeah, well, I had a good friend of mine that was that we actually went to college, did computer science together. So we'd been friends from like elementary school, and I was like, "Hey, man, we've learned a lot from this Flash build. Let's do it again in a way that like we could see us doing really well in the future." And some of the things that we learned was that the same problems we saw early on about like the templates and the was what we were seeing again in the WordPress sites and in the Squarespace sites and others, that you could do things, but it always felt like it was a Squarespace site, or it always felt like, because everything had a same feel and a same like grid layouts and things like that, where it just you felt like the same. And so we said there's a market for people who want to design, like want to have like true creative freedom. And so that's what we held on to, is like, we're going to build something that like gives those people creative freedom.
So how long did it take you to actually do the re-platforming of this though?
So
Did it take a couple of years?
Yeah, so it was a solid about a year and a half that we like really dove in and did that. We were able to reuse some of the back end infrastructure for like subscriptions and account management and some of those things that we built over the years. But it was like, as far as the application was we had to start from the ground. And when you think about building a website builder, there's a big components, because there's like the design application, but then there's like the end product that you're doing.
The rendering.
Yeah, the rendering of what you've done, and then also the infrastructure around like image hosting and management and all of the other pieces. So it's like we had all these components that you have to build to really have a good website platform. So thankfully, some of the lessons we had learned, we were able to take those and say, okay, I think if we could do it this way. And I think now our strategy and where we're at, because we're really more focused on designers, like the independent web designer who maybe was a graphic designer and now wants to do web design, and they might be, building for clients that are everything from realtors to dog groomers to whatever. Like they could be across lots of industries, but those designers are the ones that are going out and getting the clients, and they want to have an interface where they can design and hand off a website. We learned that early on, is we wanted to build a platform that allowed someone to create a site and then either sell it as a template or transfer it to another account. And so that was kind of in the core of our DNA that really allowed the growth. And now we have template shops, designers that build template shops in all kinds of industries. And we don't control those. We let them do that. But at the end of the day, when they sell a template, that's a subscription for us. So we just partner with them.
Like those designers out there are your salespeople.
Yeah, that's our sales force. And that's what I'd say is how we have been able to separate ourselves from the other platforms, is like we just have such an ecosystem of design partners that they're the ones that are going out there and they run Facebook ads for their own templates that they're selling. They're running they're the ones actually finding so many of the clients that end up on our platform.
Well, so tell me, when you decide to rebuild this, like obviously now it must be like super JavaScript heavy, right? Like this whole thing must be some insane JavaScript to do all of it.
When we stopped doing Flash, we went to React, and React was really new. So that was a big bet.
Yeah.
And I think it's been a great bet that's paid off over 10 years, because that platform, Facebook had been the initial, push forward on that, and they've really brought that, framework to life. And so it's made for a great platform.
Well, even this space that you're in has changed dramatically over the last 10 years since you did the rebuild, right? You have all the competitors like Wix and Squarespace. You have Elementor. You got people like Canva out there. You've got WordPress creating Gutenberg. So when you guys are sitting here, how do you think about this from like a product strategy perspective? Like, how do you focus on, some entrepreneurs are like, oh, I want to compete with everybody. Let's go build the next Canva, or let's build the next Elementor, or the next Wix, or whatever. Like, how do you have like that discipline? And is there like a guiding light that you're like, hey, no, we're like going to focus on this use case? Like how do you prioritize and deal with that?
It's probably
maybe
still,
you don't.
It's still a struggle always, like I can't say that we have a silver bullet, but I will say that one of the good things about our position is that we're bootstrapped, never taken investment. And so I can be patient.
You can't go too crazy.
Yeah, I can be patient with lots of things, and I don't have to be like, we have to hit these numbers, or
Yeah.
we have to hit this growth rate, or we have to do that. And so I can focus on the customer that I think really wants the creative freedom and really deliver on that, as opposed to trying to like catch everyone. And I think that's the problem that you run into with Squarespace is like, it's a great product for the person
No,
who doesn't care
it's
about their,
not.
yeah, who doesn't care about their website that much. They just need a website. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
if you just need that, then yeah, you can get something up and live. But if you're like, I really care about this. I mean, we have people that are switching from Squarespace to us every day because they're like, I just felt stuck. And
Yeah.
that's what we wanted to be like. We want to be the place where you like, I don't feel stuck. I feel like I can do the site that I want to do. And that's, we prioritize our net promoter score. And so like all the feedback from that, I mean, we maintain a high 70s net promoter score, and we're just focused on like the things that we feel like our customers and human tech support, like the people that respond and really take care of you. Because when you're working with WordPress, that's really hard to do. Like it's hard to get someone to respond when you're having a WordPress problem. And so we have WordPress experts on our team. And so in whatever issue it is, we're helping them solve their WordPress issues as well. So.
But over time, I'm sure you get a lot of requests from customers, and you must say no a lot, right? Like you must have customers who are like, well, it'd be nice if you would go add this thing and, make it more like Elementor, make it more like this. Like you have to be very disciplined to say no a lot.
Yeah. And I think one of our fortunate pieces of that has been that we focused on the design side of it. So like the visual, like how that looks, we focused a lot on that engine. And then there's so many things that you can do with the website. And so by partnering with WordPress, if someone really needs something else, there's a plugin for that. There's something that you can do to handle that specific scenario, or you can you can hire someone to custom build that, and it still plugs into our platform. And so it's kept us from, being like, oh no, we don't do that. Because like, if you want to run a shop, WooCommerce is like one of the best shops still out there. So you can run WooCommerce if you want. So it hasn't limited our platform by allowing that plugin architecture. And I mean, as far as like the product side of it, one of the things that we did different than most of them out there is the scaling on our sites is more similar to like, what you would think with like a PDF than you would think of like with a website. So people that are used to designing,
so it's not as responsive.
Well, it is, but it's all scaling. And so what that means is that like, instead of having your text wrap in weird ways, like whenever you design it, it actually looks like that. And so for the designer who's like, I built this thing on Squarespace, I looked on someone else's screen and it's all wrapped weird and there's words hanging here and things look all different. Like that was just really frustrating. So we said, let's build an interface that allows for this scaling, more visual look. And that's, and you can do a desktop and mobile side by side, because we felt like there's two main design styles that you need to handle. And so you can have a custom design for mobile and a custom design for desktop sharing the same content, but that really gives people this really visual feel for their site. And it's just different than the way that other people have approached that same, approach to doing a product.
And so it makes sense. It's like desktop and mobile are separate. And do they get any reuse between the two of those, or they kind of
they share content, but you can design them totally separate. I mean, if you wanted your font to be different on mobile than desktop, you can do that. And so like you have complete control, and there's elements that you might hide on your mobile that you have on your desktop. And so like you can have layers that work on one or the other. And so I think for people who really wanted to have a really good mobile experience, they also came to our platform and go, oh man, I can actually design that. Because, a lot of the builders out there, when it goes to mobile, you're stuck with whatever they gave you.
Yeah, I mean, everything always gets weird. I mean, all these tools that I've ever used, there's always some give and take. I mean, even with your product, right? You're like, it's really good for these scenarios, and some other scenarios, it's going to fall over somewhere, right? Like,
because we'll get the complaint that people are like, oh, but I have to design mobile too. So like that's their downside. It's like, oh, I have to adjust the mobile. And it's like, well, yeah, but you get to like for us, the customer that we have is the one that's like, we get to make this mine. We get to make it exactly how I want it to look. We have that creative freedom to make it on both.
If I'm running your engineering team, one of my biggest concerns with this has to be two things. It has to be QA. How in the world do we test this thing? And then all the integrations that must go along with this, like you mentioned, WooCommerce and all these other plugins that could break our stuff. Like, how do you handle like the QA side of this? Like QA, all the testing sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of manual testing. We have a lot of scripts that we're doing that are manual, but yeah, I mean, it is truly manual, like people getting in there and actually using it to be able to see the things that break or don't work
And you have a big battery of automated testing too?
Yeah, so we do the automated testing, but a lot of it is manual testing. We're getting better and better with some of the automated testing to be able to do the visual type things. But I mean, that's ultimately one of the reasons too. Like our support is going to be really tough to be AI driven, because most of our customer support ends up happening where our team logs into their site or like gets to see what their site is and then helps them identify what's going on. And there's a lot of context there. And feeding that context to AI is really tough to get good responses back. And so, you know, they're getting a lot more personal care when it comes to questions and solving issues and things like that. And so, yeah, as far as keeping the product running, I mean, there's definitely QA and all the pieces that you'd hope for in a software company that would release features. Not to say we don't mess up every once in a while, but and then I think WordPress has shown itself to be pretty stable over the years. And so to a certain degree, what the isolation between plugins, I mean, it works. And I think that's, you know, we have less and less issues like that with really when you start having those problems, it's when you have like way too much custom coding in WordPress and then it starts stomping on things, but that's not typically our customers.
Well, for those who are watching this or listening to this and, you know, they're building a software product, you know, sometimes we overlook the QA side of things, or we sort of undervalue it, or we don't invest enough in it. And I think your product is an example of one where the QA itself might be more work than the development is, right? Because it's like, if we add this feature, you know, we change how the font scales, or we add a new font, or whatever the thing, like you adding like these, what could seem like small innocent features, you've got tens of thousands of customers that use your product. How many of them are you going to break, right? Like the edge cases that come out of this could be enormous. And I imagine that has to be something you really have to continue to harp on your team about. It's like, guys, we have to really think about, like, if we change this, what is going to break, or what could change, and how do we QA this, right? I mean, is that part of like every development work item? You're like, how are we going to test this thing? Has to be like such a huge importance, specifically for your kind of product.
Yeah. You know, it's definitely a balance, because if you get too stuck on that, it can be paralyzing, and then you just don't have features that come out. You know, so I think to a certain degree, what we want to be able to do is roll back quickly. You know, things like that. You know, it's like we want to be able to say like, hey, every once in a while we're going to break something, and we just want to be able to roll back quickly and address it. You know, we don't want things that like ruin everything. Like, we want to have a healthy level of testing, but if we get too stuck on our testing, then nothing ever rolls out into production. And so there's always that balance that we're fighting. I would say early on in our product lifecycle, you know, like when it was me and the CTO and, you know, one other guy, like there just wasn't a lot of QA. I mean, like we were QA. And so we were used to that side of it, when it's like, we just have to have a product that works, and we're testing as much as we possibly can. So we grew from that stage where it's like, okay, now we actually probably need to have, you know, more automated testing, more things like that. But when you're just trying to get a product off the ground, sometimes you don't start from that spot where you have a lot of QA.
Yeah, I would imagine you guys would almost need to build something where you take, you know, 100 sites or whatever that you kind of program in, and you're like, hey, we're doing screenshots of all 100 of them. We roll out the code changes, go take the screenshots again. We compare them pixel by pixel, and we see what moved, right? I would think you would almost have to do some things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would kind of be true, but most of the features that we're rolling, it's not necessary. Like our engine for like rendering the site is pretty solid. So like those things just don't happen as often. We're like,
I would be the guy that's like, I'm not changing the rendering.
Yeah, exactly. And it's
not
funny
doing it.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because we're actually in a rebuild of the rendering engine, you know, right now. Like that's one of the big projects that we're doing, and it's a bear, because like we're like starting from zero and redoing that engine, and we're having to do a lot of that. Like, this is what it was in the old engine, and this is what it is in the new engine. That one's going to be a lot more difficult, and it's going to be in beta for a little bit longer. So we'll be able to say like, hey, I want to publish with the new engine, because the new engine is going to give us a lot more animation stuff and a lot more features that are going to be like really good. So people are going to want to move to that, but we don't want to just push it right away, because there's just a lot of things that could go wrong. So we want to let people.
You're gonna have to have people opt into it over, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you don't want to roll it out to everyone.
Early on, our hope is that we'll be, letting people opt in and making sure that what they've designed is actually publishing.
So what's driving that decision to rebuild the render engine? Is it adding some specific animations, or is it like a major performance overhaul of like, we need to render cleaner HTML, we need to render cleaner JavaScript? Like, what's driving
all of that? Yeah, and I mean, like you said, we're about 10 years old on this platform, and so some of the decisions that we made about how we make the site look were based on CSS version 10 years ago. And the browsers, you can expect a level of features and things that have come in the last 10 years that are so much better, more performant, make your site way better. And so we want to be able to take advantage of like a much more mature CSS platform in this new renderer. And so we haven't been able to iterate as fast in the renderer because of what you talked about. It's like, it's really tough to like iterate on the things that could break everything. So like there's a certain amount of it that kind of stuck. This is how it works, and so this is our chance to say, okay, we're going to change how that works. So.
Well, one of the biggest frustrations for me, I've been involved in building websites for 20 years. I built 3 different I'll call them website builders, but they're not like what you guys do. They're more like helping build websites for car dealers and like powering the templates behind them. And I've done that for like 3 or 4 different industries. But the nightmare of it is always website performance. Like, how do we run it through the Google, page speed thing and get a good result? Because that's what everybody's going to look at. Like, I mean, how much do you guys deal with that nightmare? You're like, okay, how do we get every ounce of speed out of this thing? Reduce the JavaScript, reduce this, like.
Yeah, I mean, we've had projects over the years always focusing on different aspects of that. Like whether it be image load times or the types of images that we're serving, or that time to first byte type things. Like we've worked on those projects, but really there's a few things that we get flagged for in the Google page speed that there's just no way we could get around that without an entire rebuild. And so like our customers would be like, hey, can you fix this JavaScript load thing? It's like, well, that thing needs to load or your site looks like crap on initially. So like it has to be there. And so those are the things where it's like, okay, in order to really score high on our page speed insights, we got to start over on some of this stuff.
And by the way, every website in the world also has these sort of problems. Yeah. And Google is sort of crazy for thinking everyone is going to fix them.
Yeah, exactly.
But the customers don't want to hear that. But you sort of know that's the reality, right?
Yeah. But there's things that you're like, okay, I get it. We want our customer sites to feel fast. And there's certain things that make them feel faster than others. And so we will focus on the things that I feel like have meaningful input.
It's a never-ending battle for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate having you on the show today and giving us some insight into building a product like this. You're in a very competitive market, but you found your niche, right? Like, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And I love how, you guys have been in business for a long time, that not only has the business model changed a little bit, but the tech stack has dramatically changed. You got to rewrite this thing. So I think some interesting lessons here today. And congrats on building a very successful business. I mean, you guys have a fantastic business. And I guess my last question for you is like, what's next besides the nightmare of rebuilding this rendering engine? Like, what's next for Showit?
Yeah, I think I'm always asking that question for our team because that's the thing about technology is you're always on the cusp of something that. And I feel like that's one of the great things about our history now. It's like we went through, what it looks like to be on a dying cycle, and then be on the other side of it. And so I think we're always scanning the horizon of like, what's AI changing about this? Like what is the, what is the next version of website building going to be? And, so I think at the moment I can't say like, oh, this is what's next for us right now. Like we're trying to steward a really good product and community of designers because we have so many designers that are using our platform to run their own businesses and that's running their livelihood. And so for us, it's like we want to be a really great steward of that platform and get the features in there. I mean, part of it is that, changing animation and browsers and, so we need to get these things in there to help our customers really help their customers. And so, so as far as what's next, Not entirely sure, but I think, like that's every few months we're saying.
Sometimes that's okay when you have a very mature product, right?
Yeah.
You're like, all we can do is continue to optimize it and, deal with scale, deal with, weird maintenance and technical debt and all these things, trying to keep things running and optimize costs,
Yeah.
It's part of the deal.
Yeah, one of the things that we did this last year is we actually acquired another company that does like the lead generation on your websites. So they did like the pop-ups and welcome mats and all those kinds of things. And so I don't know if you've heard of SumoMe. They grew years ago as like the really one of the early pop-up things, but they were for sale and we ended up picking that up and have rebranded it to Badao. And I have someone else running that company, but it allows us to be in two spaces in the website arena. And, you can use the pop-ups on, Shopify, WooCommerce, Squarespace, whatever you want. So like it's an, independent platform, but it pairs really well with our platform for the lead side of that. And so now we have kind of two fronts that we're working on. And I think that's really helped us out to diversify so that we're not just only on the website side.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Todd. Again, this was Todd Watson. We love the Watsons.
Yes.
Founder and CEO of Showit. Check them out at showit.com. If you want to build a website, you want an easy way to do it, Showit's your way to do it.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been great.
All right. Thank you, Todd.
Right.